What's wrong with you people? You don't know what real danger looks like anymore.
Welcome back everyone to more from the Sableyes. Today we're going to be in the classroom learning about Scovillain EX, a very, very cool card that lots of people have been seeing some success with on the ladder. Came second in an online tournament, so let's take a look at that list and explain just why this card might be something that you could use on the Pokemon TCG Live ladder. The first thing that we need to talk about is the main attack that we're going to be using. We've got it up here on the board. It is two-headed Crushing. For 2 grass energy, we're going to deal 140 damage, and then we'll discard a random card from our opponent's hand. We'll also discard a card from the top of their deck, meaning that every time we're attacking with this particular attack, we're getting 2 cards into the discard pile for our opponent. Now this is obviously very, very strong. If we can disrupt our opponent and limit their hand size, we can potentially lock them at a very low number of cards. Plus, we can sometimes randomly hit some really good cards that they might desperately need to get their win condition underway. A big issue though is going to be that 2 grass energy attack cost. It effectively means that we need to attach an energy every single turn, and we need to hope that our opponent doesn't get a KO on our Scovillain EX, otherwise we're not going to be able to attack until we've powered up one manually again. Disruption is going to be the key for this deck, and so we've got a couple of good supporters here that are going to help us try and slow our opponent down. Misfortune Sisters is obviously a very strong supporter card, looking at the top 5 cards on our opponent's deck and discarding any item cards that we find there. It's going to be useful for us against decks that use rare candy like Charizard or Chien-Pao. And if we're dealing with decks like Lugia V-Star, we might be able to hit some of their Ultra Balls or cards that they're trying to discard Archeops with, so could potentially be useful. The other card that's going to be super handy for us is Eri. It effectively does the exact same thing, except instead of looking at the top 5 cards of our opponent's deck, we're going to be looking at their hand. That does 2 things for us. It helps us remove trainer cards that they have in their hand. We get to discard 2 items, so that's pretty handy. And it also gives us an opportunity to look and see what our opponent has access to decide what supporter we might choose to play next. Maybe we don't want to play a Judge or an Iono because our opponent doesn't have a very good hand. Eri will help us decide that. We also have some other quite frustrating disruption cards that could prove painful for your opponent. Things like Crushing Hammer to potentially discard energy cards. That on a coin flip is going to be very, very annoying. We've also got Pokemon League Headquarters, which against Ancient Box and Future Box decks is going to be very, very useful. It'll stop them from attacking in ways that they're comfortable with and force them to attach an extra energy, which is obviously going to be useful. And finally, we've got Grabber. It gives us a chance to look at our opponent's hand, maybe decide whether playing Eri is a good idea, but we'll also be able to remove Pokemon from that hand to potentially slow our opponent down. Maybe they've got a Luminion or something like that we could potentially remove, or a Squawkabilly EX. That would be fantastic. Maybe we can slow them down by removing Pokemon like Lugia V-Star or Charizard EX, their main attackers that they're going to need to get their strategy underway. Here is the list. It's a super, super strong one. Thank you very, very much to the players who have played this online. If you want to check it out, it's down in the description. We're going to take it out onto the ladder now. We'll see whether we can get a couple of hand locks with this thing, but you know what? I think it's a pretty solid list. Also, I can't believe I've made a video. How about that? So let's see how this deck works in action. We'll see whether or not we're going to be able to do something. We've at least got the Buddy-Buddy Poffin, so we can get a couple of our Capsakid and our Bidoof in play. We can attach an energy, which is really important, like we mentioned before, and beyond that, we don't have much more to do. But at least we've got the minimum required cards. We've got the attacker potentially for next turn, and we have a Bibarel to get ourselves moving. Now, we're up against what looks to be an Ancient Box deck, so we're up against a one-prizer that is going to be very, very difficult for us to deal with, especially if they can put down their big tools, whatever they're called. I can't remember exactly what that card is named. Ancient Booster Energy Capsule, that sounds familiar. I wouldn't be making those words up. But the big thing that we'll be able to do against this particular matchup is use our Stadium. We're going to be able to use Pokemon League HQ to force our opponent to attach 3 energy to each of their attackers rather than 2. It's going to be a lot harder for them to get an attack off. So, Sada now from our opponent. They're going to be accelerating at least 1 energy onto this Koraidon. And it looks to me like they're going to try and get a knockout on this Skwovet, which I'm perfectly okay with. They knock out the Skwovet, we get our Capsakid in the active, ready to evolve, and potentially start attacking there is that tool, which is going to be quite frustrating. So let's see whether or not we can actually get this moving, because we need to get an energy, and that's going to be the real difficult part for us. There's the Primordial Beatdown knocking out the Skwovet, and now we have a problem unless we can find the energy card. So we'll chuck our Capsakid in the active, and then we can get moving. First of all, Crushing Hammer, see if it works. Doesn't work. Crushing Hammer never works. It's never relevant, so don't worry about it. It's just a 56 card deck. What we are going to do, though, is we are going to counter catcher up this Radiant Greninja, a very good card for our opponent. I don't want them to have access to more cards. We want to lock their hand down if possible. This is not a great spot for us to be in. We don't have an energy yet. We do have another Capsakid. We've got a couple of Grabbers and an Ultra Ball, so we might play one of these. We've got a couple of Pokemon to choose from, a couple of items as well. That's not a particularly good hand, but it will be very, very good for us if we can get an attack off. So we're going to Ultra Ball. We're going to get rid of Capsakid and Grabber. And we're going to grab ourselves Bibarel. We also want to throw that League Headquarters down, because that will mean that we will force our opponent to find extra energy to attack into us. As long as we can find one energy here, we should be okay, and we do manage to find them, which is fantastic. Let's also try this Crushing Hammer. Maybe the second one will work. That would be fantastic. No? Okay, I understand. Sometimes it doesn't go our way, but the big thing here is we can use two-headed crushing? Whatever it might be called, remove a card from their hand, take a knockout on this Greninja, and now we are looking pretty solid. We've got an Eri for next turn. We know that their hand has a couple of item cards. They've also got a, Mischievous, whatever it's called, a Fluttermane down there as well, so we'll be able to remove that if we want to. That comes down onto the field. They've got an Earthen Vessel. They're going to discard a card from their hand. It's going to be a counter catcher that they top decked. So we know that their last card in hand is an S-Ball, getting 2 Dark Energies, and they'll either attach that to the active in order to attack us, or to the bench if they forget that that's what that card is stopping them from doing. Pokemon League Headquarters stopping them from being able to attack without an extra energy card, because they're a basic, and they've forgotten. So we've pretty much just locked this game up, because now they've got 1 card in hand. We can discard it, and they'll be relying on their top decks for the rest of the game. So a very, very handy spot for us to be in. We can play our second Scovillain down. We can throw down an energy here. If we want to, we can just Industrious Incisors now. We don't want to play the Iono. We don't want our opponent to have a good hand. And so maybe just a 2-headed Crushing from us. 140 damage, discard the energy, and an Explorer's Guidance off the top deck. It's a very good card for us to hit. Obviously powers up their Roaring Moon, but their Roaring Moon will never attack us if they don't get multiple energy in play. So it's going to be pretty tricky here for our opponent. You're going to be relying on a top deck, and every turn that they don't play down a good card, they're going to be losing, essentially, and they've just conceded. So they understand it's not a great spot to be in. Let's try this out one more time and see if we can't get a better deck on the ladder to play against. Time to go, and we're up against a Pidgey, so this could be anything. Hopefully it's not Control, but if it is, we'll see if we're able to get a good couple of attacks off here. We'll grab a Bidoof and a Capsakid. We've got an Energy, and we've got our Scovillain, which is fantastic. We've got an Ultra Ball as well. Let's grab her. We'll see what we're playing against. It looks like it's a Charizard deck. If I had to take a guess, we've got an Ultra Ball and a Prime Catcher in there as well, so we'll make sure that we remember those for next turn. Maybe we can find an Eri off of a Bibarel or something like that. We're just going to pass here. We've done all that we need to do. All we need to do now is hope that our opponent doesn't find a way to knock out our Capsakid, because as I mentioned at the start of the video, it is very awkward when you do not find energy in this deck. That's why we're playing so many of them relative to the Pokemon that we're playing. We need to find energy. We need to attach them on turn 1, or otherwise we can't realistically do much. So definitely worth considering that if you're going to choose to play this deck. It looks like our opponent going for an Ultra Ball to grab themselves a Lumineon. So they'll throw that down, and that's probably going to go looking for a card like Arven for Charizard to get that Buddy-Buddy Poffin of their own. If they can get a bunch of Pokemon down, then they're going to be in a pretty good position. But obviously, we're going to be in a better position if we're able to take a knockout and also remove some of the cards from their hands. So we'll see if we can manage it. Here come those Charmanders now. We've obviously shuffled one to the bottom of the deck, so they'll now have to search for it with their Arven and Buddy-Buddy Poffin. And that leaves in their hand, I think, Well, there's at least a Prime Catcher in there. I'm not 100% sure what the other card is. Can't remember what our opponent has discarded and what they've already played, but that's okay. There's a Radzard found its way into the bin at some point. Defiance Band. Okay, alright, so they're going to get the Buddy-Buddy Poffin here to get probably a Bibarel and a Charmander, if I had to guess. And that leaves their hand as one card that I'm not sure about. Prime Catcher and Defiance Band. So we'll keep on top of that. It could be the Radzard. I don't remember seeing it being discarded, but it could easily have been. And if you've watched me in the past, you'll know that I'm not going to check. I'm just not going to check the discard pile. I'm not going to do it. I'm just going to presume that I know. So, don't worry about it. Don't worry. It's fine, guys. It's fine. Looks like our opponent going for a second Pidgey here, so they're expecting to get knocked out. So, oh, an Eri. Excellent. Okay, so that's going to be super handy for us. I'm happy to do that. In fact, we can probably just play that now. We'll get rid of the Prime Catcher that's definitely in there. We can find out we've got Forest Sealstone and Defiance Band. Okay, so now with this attack here, let's see. If we can 50-50 the Forest Sealstone here, we should be in a pretty good spot, and we do. And we get a rare candy off the top deck as well. Okay, alright. So now our opponent's sitting with a Defiance Band in hand. There's nothing else for them to do. We can just take our time now. Unless they top deck something crazy, they are not going to be able to do too much more this coming turn. So the question for our opponent is, who are they happy to just get rid of here? It's going to be a second Pidgey into the active as a top deck from our opponent. Can they find a card? They can't. Okay, so now we're cruising. We've got a Bibarel down here. We've got a Scovillain we can evolve as well. We'd love to attach another energy, so let's try and do that. Let's Industrious Incisors into 3 cards here. Don't tell you what, do we find the energy? We certainly do. We'll throw them down, and then, you know what, we can Ultra Ball here for a Skwovet. I don't think we need to. I think we can just attack. We'll remove the Pidgey. We don't know what the last card in our opponent's hand is, but we get rid of Charmeleon and the Defiance Belt, which is super, super handy. So one random card from our opponent and a top deck. That's pretty much all that they're working with. So I think we're pretty much locking ourselves up with a game here. Our opponent passes again. All right, now we're in. There is almost nothing now that our opponent can do, because now we've got ourselves set up. We're about to attack again, another big attack into our opponent. We're going to grab ourselves another Bidoof. Actually, we can get the Skwovet now. Realistically, that seems pretty reasonable. We can do that. We'll grab that down here. We can throw the Hero's Cape onto the Scovillain. It's never, ever, ever going to be knocked out by a Charizard now until the very end of the game. We've got a Judge, we've got another Bidoof, we've got another Buddy-Buddy Poffin. We can play all these cards down. The Judge we won't play, though. We don't want our opponent to have any more cards than they already have. Two-headed Crushing. Doesn't take a knockout, but discards a Charizard and a Red Candy. Oh my goodness. Oh wow, so if we'd gone the other way, we would have discarded whatever the other card was, and then our opponent would have just evolved straight into Charizard. But not to be, it's not to be. Oh my goodness, this deck is a lot of fun when it works, I'll say that much. You just probably don't want to be on the other end of it when it's not working, because as you can imagine, if you don't get energy early, you're probably going to be in a bit of trouble. Let's Misfortune Sisters. Let's get rid of all of these cards. We don't want rare candies or super odds in our opponent's deck. We do not want that at all. And then we can just two-headed Crushing again. We're going to take 2 prizes here, and we are going to remove whatever card is in their hand. It's a Fire Energy. Another Charmander goes. And now I do not think that there is a single way that our opponent can try and win this game. They could come in with a Radiant Charizard at some point. That could be a method to take a couple of prizes. But they're still on 6. Like, I mean, I feel like we can probably win even if they do that. They're obviously not going to. We are in the lead quite convincingly, and a huge amount of respect to our opponent for staying in. Obviously didn't need to. They're staying in the game. They're giving us a chance to show off the strength of Scovillain. We can start firing all these cards off. I've obviously not recorded in a very long time because I've forgotten to turn off my Facebook notifications that are popping off in the background. We can have a Grabber here, have a little bit of a Gripply Grabber. Let's have a look. Ultra Ball and Fire Energy, not particularly good cards. And now that Radzard is not going to be super helpful for them, because we've got the Pokemon League headquarters down, two-headed Crushing. We'll discard one of those cards, the Fire Energy, and another Charizard EX. So this game is wrapped up in a neat little bow for us. You can see why this deck has been a little bit successful. Like, it's not brilliant, it's not perfect, but it is a lot of fun, and our opponent now They can't even attack with Heat Tackle. I was about to say attacks with Heat Tackle for 60 damage. They can't even do that because of the stadium. We'll take our last knockout, discard our last cards, and accept some gracious victories with Scovillain EX, which is a pretty good card. Hey, listen, thanks for coming along. I appreciate you watching. You didn't have to, and you're here now. So if you like it, like the video, subscribe, all that good stuff, and I will see you next time for more from the Sableyes. Goodbye. Can't believe I made a video.
Huh? Yeah, it's not good. That's dead either.
You're not a doctor, are you?
I should be.
Okay.